And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage. And you're joining us on the podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Lance Tanaka. He's currently the founder and managing director of the Lance Tanaka Group, which is a consulting firm that provides executive coaching for the best of the best, working with leading multinational and local companies in their respective industries throughout Asia Pac. Since 2001, Lance has accumulated over 17,000 coaching hours of executives from China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Japan, Korea, Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, US, and Europe. And in terms of the other side of your world, prior to that is you've got a lot of corporate leadership experience. So managing director of PepsiCo and Salem Group, VP of Southeast Asia for Pepsi-Cola, sales director at Tokyo Bottling, et cetera, because it's I find that interesting, Lance. Welcome, in that there are coaches that have been coaches their whole life, and there are business people that have been business people their entire lives, but you had the best of both worlds. So how did one lead to the other? Let's start there.
Well, it actually started when I was 35. I was at the time I was the general manager for Tokyo Pepsi. Great job, great company. Reason why I can do what I do now is because of Pepsi. But I realized, okay, that's not what I want to do for the rest of my life. I don't want to be a corporate executive. It's great, but not the rest of my life. And so I actually set a target saying at 45, 10 years from then, that I would retire and I would set up a company. At the time, I didn't know what that company would be or what it would do, but I just knew, okay, I have to figure out a way to be able to leverage my strengths, my passions, my experiences.
But wait, I want to stop you there as a coach, because as a coach, if somebody came to you with such a simultaneously specific yet vague goal, how would you respond to yourself at 35 as a coach? Because there seems something interesting about that.
Well, I think that the starting point for most people, and actually, I've coached, as you said, 17,000 hours, over 1,000 executives over the last 20 years. The number one topic of all the topics we talk about for leadership is around authenticity, which is around how do I become the leader I was designed to be? How do I leverage who I am? And so as I was going through that process over the 10 years, I started going through exercises to start identifying my strengths, my passion, all the experiences. And what it did, it really started getting really clear to me why I was successful at Pepsi and Nike, and what I need to do to use that for my entrepreneurial experience. And that was all around leadership development, around people.
So would you say that as a coach, you were also your first client? Because it sounds like you were incredibly introspective and sort of applying a lot of coaching tools on yourself, but maybe not using that language. Or is that not a fair statement?
No, that is. I think self-discovery is I shouldn't say a lost art, but it's something that a lot of successful people don't do because, like I was at Pepsi Nike, I'm just focused on, I got to fix this problem. I got to drive this market. I got to turn this around. And all your energies, especially your mental energies, are focused around that. But in reality is that you need to be able to spend some time around self-reflection, around self-discovery and trying to figure out who you are and, again, become more of that.
And, what role does a good coach play? Because I would argue that most people are pretty poor judges of how introspective or self-aware they are. And part of the function of a coach is to help someone through that process, not to outsource the self-awareness, right? But to help them, someone to be honest and frank and authentic and call BS and all that. Is that aligned with your thinking?
Yeah, I'd say that's one of the key aspects of being an executive coach is leaders, CEOs, they're on an island. No one tells them what they really think.
Their jokes are really funny, right?
I love your vision. Yeah, don't fix anything, don't change. And what's needed is somebody who says, calls BS and says, hey, you said this, you didn't do it. Or around self-reflection, because most people say, yes, I want to do it, but they don't. And so one of the roles of a coach is to hold people accountable.
Yep. This is that forcing mechanism. So I want to flip now, Lance, from your backstory, because interesting, seasoned corporate exec to coach. And just because you have the skills and the credibility on the corporate side doesn't mean you would be successful as a coach and I'm not talking about the art of coaching, but from the business side. So let's talk about some of sort of the struggles, trials, tribulations of what it really takes to stand up a successful coaching practice.
Yeah, when I'm always looking to recruit coaches into what I call my circle, the 9 right now, it's a slow process, because when I look at somebody as a coach, there's basically 3 things I look at. Number one, and it's kind of like a come to the party DNA thing, which is, do you have the overwhelming passion to help people to change? The difference between, do I care about people or do I care about helping people to change? Those are 2 very, very different things.
Okay.
Because I think one of the key aspects of a successful coaching assignment is that person changes and everybody around them sees it. So the first thing I look for is, do you really have this overwhelming desire to help people change? Second one is, do you have this natural, again, DNA, natural ability to get people to trust you quickly? Do people open up to you right away? Do people tell you their life story? Do people tell you, oh, I'm having a terrible time with my marriage, or my boss is an idiot?
Yep.
But the third thing is around practical, which is, have you been in business? Have you been in turnarounds, mergers and acquisitions? Have you helped develop a company grow? And have you done it in different situations?
But I wanted to go more specifically to your business. You're in the business of coaching, right? And it's not just you. So let me sort of back into this. Most coaches don't have enough clients to make a living. That's just a fact, right? There are more coaches out there that sort of dabble or whatever. And it has no bearing on, they may be excellent coaches. They just might be god awful at the sales and the marketing and the business side. Like, how do I actually get the clients? Geez, I have no idea. Get me the client and I can do miraculous things. So you've checked the box. You've got a full roster of clients. Then you've gone where very, very few other coaches go. You actually have others deploying, you call it your circle. So I want to just sort of talk about the business model. What are the things that you believe in relative to finding clients on a consistent basis, serving those clients, pricing, really the business side of it? Because that's where I think, there are bad coaches in terms of they're just not qualified, but I think most folks that could be awesome coaches struggle more on the business side than on the art of coaching, if you will.
Yeah. Well, couple things. One, networking is absolute priority. You've got to have the discipline to network constantly. And this doesn't mean, well, I'll do this on a Friday or I'll do this next month. You've got to do it every single day. So that's.
But let me push on that. So old school networking, pre-COVID and even pre-COVID, it was antiquated. Was things that most people dread: the local chamber of commerce and the getting out there and the cocktail parties and whatever. I think for the most part, that world is sort of over. Right. So networking means something different today. How do I interact with people that I wouldn't have without doing some certain things? Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Right. Well, it's not just networking just to meet people. It's got to be targeted. You've got to have a strategy to it. And my strategy was, when I first started out, my focus was, I'm going to start working with companies in the top 10 of their industries, their sectors. So that's why I focused on a McKinsey or a Goldman Sachs or a Deloitte.
Okay, so stay there for a minute. So you defined, listen, I want to work with the best of the best. Here's a list of some best of best companies, Goldman, McKinsey, whoever you chose to define that. And then you said, after that, okay, and in those organizations, it's people at a certain level, managing director, whatever it was. So now you've gone from the broad universe to fairly narrow, which would then sort of help you select the networking you do. You're not going to go to the local, realtors networking event if that doesn't align with your objectives.
Exactly. But then the next step, and this is the part that a lot of people miss, is that you need to look at your current network. And I'd spent 20 something years in business, in the industry, and you build an exceptional network.
Sure.
And so it's look at the people that whether it's colleagues, ex-colleagues, family, friends, associations, people that know you. And what you do is you start with them. with the idea of I want to get to McKinsey or I want to get to Goldman Sachs. And I'm sure you heard the term 6 degrees of separation.
Yep.
And the way you get to that decision maker is you can't go direct to them. You can't cold call and say, oh, by the way, I'm Lance Tanaka. Would you be interested in leadership coaching? No, of course it doesn't work. You got to get introduced to them by somebody that they know or trust. So you got to start that process.
So I agree. I agree with that 100%. And we take a lot of our clients through what we call a strategic account planning process, where we say, hey, listen, you've gotten to this stage of the game. You probably have a nice network. You're probably fairly well liked, renowned, and respected. Number one, you have to recalibrate that network, because the network only knows you by their last point of contact. So in your case, if I haven't talked to you for X number of years, I might only know that you were the Tokyo bottling company guy 20 something years ago. So the burden is on you to keep them up to date. Say, hey, actually, this is what I'm doing now. This is why I'm doing it. And these are the types of folks I'd like to connect to, right? And you could actually light up your network, like you said, not just directly, like, oh, I can get you to introduce you to 5 folks at McKinsey, but even if you just recalibrate how they think about you, oh, Lance is now an executive coach looking to work with the best of the best. I can now file that in my brain. And when I come across someone, now I have a reason to reach out to you.
Yeah. A lot of it's top of mind. And that, okay, let's say I do talk to somebody, I make a recontact and they know, okay, I'm looking for this. It's gonna drop out of their mind when something comes along. And so that's why you need to have this ability to reconnect over a period of time. So it's not, when you're connecting for the first time, you're not selling. It's all about let's reestablish our relationship, and then over time you start making connections with that person here and there, and then at one point, then maybe you get into the sales cycle.
If you're enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about our podcast, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. We're available on Apple Podcast and on all major listening apps, as well as at thoughtleadershipleverage.com/podcasts.
The other thing that I found really powerful for me in my business, it's all about being referred. Referrals are everything. And I've got an amazing client list. I mean, you look at my client list, it's just incredible. But in the past, I didn't do anything about it. So now I actually go to my clients who are happy with me, who I've been working with for years, and say, hey, is there anybody that you think could use my service? Or I might even frame it, saying, do you know people in this company or in this industry that could use our services? Most of our business is through referral now. And then because I'm dealing with the companies like the Goldmans, the McKinseys, the Deloittes, they have a lot of clients. And so they...
well, there's also, I think, some of the nature of coaching is because it is such a personal, intimate, relationship. It's not like, oh, Lance is a great bricklayer. Let me show you the bricks he laid for me. Like, it doesn't work like that. So it needs to be like, hey, when I look a colleague in the eye and say, I've been working with Lance for 2 years, and here's how he's changed the way I think about the world and the game and all that, they're going to be begging for that connection, that introduction, right? So I think there is something to be said for that. And again, the referrals, different businesses, it's always important. In some businesses, and I would think coaching is probably at the top of the list, it's capital I important.
Yeah.
But so talk about now.
Some people are sensitive about it, but most people that I work with or I've worked with will go out of their way to introduce me.
So I want to get into a little bit of another area that I've observed coaches, consultants, and authors sort of struggle. So it's really an awkward, difficult, sort of strange position to be in. Of ultimately, you're in the business of selling yourself as a coach, but you're also the CEO of your own entity, right? And once you start talking about negotiating, pricing, all that sort of stuff, what I have found, and it might not be true across the board, is when you're, in a high touch professional services and you start sort of going down those conversations, it's usually the client that wins more than the provider, because you just want to get out of that conversation and get into doing the good work. So how are you able to make the case and defend, a premium pricing position?
Sure. First of all, you've got to be really confident. You've got to believe that my service is worth more than its weight in gold. If you don't have that confidence, you're just going to get bargained down to, the lowest denominator. So I'd say, first of all, you've got to be supremely confident that you are charging the right rate. Now, when I first started in the business, I didn't charge high enough, and I didn't know, what's the right rate that you charge. And so I started getting into doing surveys or responding to surveys that would give us information about this is the coaching world, these are the rates, these are the hours, and started discovering where I fit.
So stay there for a minute, because I think that a lot of people come into coaching and they just don't know. So for example, if your strategy was go after the best of the best, but because you weren't that savvy about pricing and you started putting out sort of low-level pricing makes a statement. You're like, wait a minute, the best of the best are charging whatever, $1,000 an hour. Why are you charging 72? Like both can't be true, because pricing also has a function of supporting the brand promise. I only work with the best, high stakes outcome, ROI. Well, why are you giving it away for that price? And I think there's this conflict of, I'm going to be nervous to say that big number out loud or to put it in a proposal.
Exactly. But if one, if you're confident in your ability, two, you understand where you fit in the, versus the industry. Yep. I think that gives you a lot, better foundation to be able to, I guess you want to call it, negotiate. Now, I'm fortunately in a situation where I don't negotiate.
Right, which is the only place to be, right? And I think, and I don't mean to be snarky, but it's like, I think that it's an indication of a somewhat unsophisticated buyer when they're trying to negotiate, unless your pricing is just way out of whack or something. Say, listen, a top tier coach over a 6-month engagement, this is the range, I'm in the range. We don't really need to talk a lot about pricing because it is what it is, right?
Yeah. And it's the responsibility of the buyer, and it's usually somebody in HR.
Yeah.
Well, it's their job to get you negotiated down to a lower rate. And I understand. Right. I don't hold it personally, but I basically say, here's the rate. If that doesn't work for you, fine. What we can do is maybe reduce the scope. Because if you're looking at overall budget is too high, okay, let's reduce the scope, and then maybe we can get it closer.
Well, and I love that. So I love that because the reducing the scope says, I'm not giving you the same for less, I'm giving you less for less. And I think a lot of people, it seems like an obvious tactic, but like, okay, if you don't want to pay me X over 6 months, then why don't we start with paying me Y over 3 months? Would probably look like something like 50% of the other, but you still kept your baseline and put your stake in the ground of, this is my value. If you don't want to commit to all of it or whatever. And I think a lot of people are, again, reluctant to do that. And you mentioned the confidence. I want to push on the confidence, because I think the flip side of confidence is to be able to have the case studies, anecdotes, or whatever to say, here's some of the outcomes I've gotten for folks like you. Would that be of interest to you?
Yeah. And, most buyers will ask you, who have you coached? What have you done? Give us some case studies.
Yeah.
Especially interested in their industry. Say, do you have experience in the pharma, biotech industry? Actually, in reality, Peter, it doesn't matter. And a good coach.
Well, that's exactly.
It doesn't matter if it's pharma or automobiles or high tech.
Stay there for a minute, because I think that is a huge issue that people understand. Like, wait a minute, you're not paying me top dollar because I know pharma better than you. You've been in the pharma business for 30 years. You're one of the top 5 people in your company. I'm the last guy who's going to teach you anything about that. But let me tell you what I know about leadership. Let me tell you what I know about, being authentic. Let me tell you what I know about that. And the fact that I've got this portfolio of industries actually enhances our experience, because I can bring you things that people in finance or consulting or CPG or whatever are doing that you wouldn't even think of, because you're kind of so myopic only being in pharma for so long.
Exactly. And what really sells clients is, basically 2 things. Is they want to know your track record. So, if you've done one engagement with, because you'll see a lot of coaches' websites says, oh, I work with J&J. Well, they only did one coaching assignment. That to me is not credibility. Go in there and say, I've worked with J&J for 7 years and I've done 10 people. I've worked with Deloitte 20 years and done 150 people. That's one thing, credibility. But the second thing is what you mentioned is case studies. If you can give them examples of situations like what they're looking for and how you've done it with this company, whether it's the same industry or not, that's what grabs their attention, because they're saying, yeah, that's my problem. That's the issue that we have. And you see that you've done it.
Yeah. And then I think there's 2 sort of outcomes from the case studies. Is how did that impact the business? Oh, good. We were stuck, or we rolled out some failed products or whatever, and now we're unstuck. And then the other, which they might be more interested in, but probably won't verbalize, and as a result of that, my SVP went on to become COO. Like, look at the career trajectory, which is another testament to the outcomes of the accomplishments.
Yeah, I mean, very rarely can you point to a metric and saying, well, we helped this person gain 3 market share points. I mean, we just can't.
Yeah.
If you can get to this point of saying, here's what happened, this person changed in this way, people around us saw it, and from that they were able to move up. That's a metric that's important.
Awesome. Well, this has been fantastic, Lance. I appreciate your candor and sharing your story, and you're obviously passionate about what you do. There was a lot packed into a short period of time today, so thank you so much for sharing it with us.
My pleasure, Peter. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.